When it comes to cattle production, there is no denying that Texas rules the roost. So let us take a look at why they are the cattle capital of the United States and why other states can't seem to dethrone them from there now. One spot. Texas owns the title for the most cattle in the country. And when it comes to just beef cows alone, they've got around 4,075,000 beef cows. That's around 14.62% of all the beef cows in the United States. That much cattle requires a lot of land to graze on. In fact, Texas has around 123,800 square miles of grazing land set aside just for these cattle. That's a lot of land. But Texas is not alone when it comes to having the largest cow herd. They do have the largest overall cow herd in the U.S., including cattle, calves, and dairy cattle. They've got an estimated total of about 9.4 million head. This large number of cattle makes cattle production the top agricultural commodity in Texas. It generates more than $10 billion in sales each year. With this many cattle roaming around, it's no surprise that cattle farming is so popular in Texas. In 2021, Texas sold nearly 68,000 head of cattle at auction markets across the state. This was worth about $1.26 billion. And during the first half of 2022, Texas sold about 36,000 head of cattle worth roughly $760 million. While this may seem like a lot of cattle to be sold off, the total number of cattle sold is only a fraction of the state's entire herd. So don't worry, the rest of the cattle are still happily munching on grass somewhere in the vast fields of Texas. There are various reasons why Texas has become the go-to state for cattle production. The first reason is the availability of vast rangelands suitable for grazing. Texas has a large amount of open land, which provides ample space for cattle to roam and graze. The state's diverse geography includes flat, open plains, rolling hills, and deserts that can support large herds of cattle. Also, Texas has a favorable climate for cattle raising. Most parts of the state experience warm weather year-round, allowing cattle to graze and thrive in a comfortable environment. Additionally, the state's natural resources such as water and vegetation are abundant and provide ample food and water sources for cattle. Texas also has a long history and tradition of cattle ranching dating back to the early days of Spanish colonization. The state's ranching heritage has led to the development of specialized infrastructure, expertise, and a skilled workforce for cattle production. Texas has a well-established cattle infrastructure, including numerous feedlots, packing plants, and processing facilities that support the industry. These facilities provide essential services for cattle producers, allowing them to raise and sell their cattle efficiently. Texas is also home to some of the most famous breeds of cattle in the world, such as the Texas Longhorn. These breeds are known for their hardiness, adaptability, and unique characteristics, making them sought after by cattle producers across the globe. The Longhorn is one of the oldest breeds of cattle in North America and originated in Texas during the early colonial period. The breed is known for its distinctive horns, which can grow extremely long, and the ability to thrive in harsh environments. Texas has also implemented policies and programs to support and promote the cattle industry within the state. These initiatives aim to enhance cattle production, improve animal health, and provide resources to cattle producers. The state's commitment to the cattle industry has contributed to its growth and success. Now you might be wondering what happens to all those cattle once they leave Texas. Well, the answer is they end up in our supermarkets as beef. Texas is the nation's top producer of cattle for slaughter, with nearly half of all fed cattle coming from within the state borders. The majority of these cattle are fed in the Panhandle region, which is known for its vast grasslands and cattle ranches. Texas produces more cattle for slaughter than any other state in the best 7 states combined. California ranks second, but still falls short of Texas production by almost 1 million head of cattle. Let us take a closer look at how Texas stacks up against the other states when it comes to raising cattle. You might be surprised at the results. When we compare Texas to other states in the U.S., it becomes clear that Texas is in a league of its own when it comes to cattle production. The next closest states, Oklahoma, Missouri, Nebraska, and South Dakota simply cannot compete with the sheer volume of cattle raised in Texas. Oklahoma is the second largest cattle-producing state with around 2 million head of cattle. However, this is still less than half of the number of cattle raised in Texas. Similarly, the other states trail even further behind. Even if we combine the cattle populations of the top 5 cattle-producing states, they would still fall short of Texas's impressive herd size. Texas dominates not just because of its sheer size or agricultural prowess, but also due to a combination of factors that make it uniquely suited for cattle raising. These factors include a long-standing ranching tradition, favorable weather conditions, abundant natural resources, and specialized infrastructure. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, of course Texas has the most cattle. It's a big state. So let's change things up a bit and look at the numbers per square mile. When we adjust for land area, Texas is still the clear winner. Texas has a cattle population density of about 11 cattle per square mile, whereas Oklahoma, the next closest state, has a density of around 6 cattle per square mile. Even if we account for the size of the state, Texas still raises nearly twice as many cattle as the next closest competitor. So why does Texas dominate cattle production in the U.S.? The answer lies in a perfect storm of geographic, historic, and infrastructural factors. First, Texas boasts an abundance of land suitable for cattle grazing. Its vast open plains provide ample space for raising large herds. The state's hot, dry climate with warm winters allows cattle to graze year-round. Natural vegetation such as grasses and shrubs provide constant nourishment for the animals. Texas's rich soil fertility supports the growth of nutritious pastureland, ensuring cattle have access to high-quality forage. Additionally, abundant water sources, including rivers, lakes, and underground aquifers, help sustain cattle populations. Texas's favorable climate, abundant resources, and extensive grazing land contribute to its status as a prime cattle-raising state. Another significant factor contributing to Texas's cattle dominance is its well-established cattle infrastructure. Over the years, Texas has developed a robust network of feedlots, auction markets, and processing facilities. These facilities provide essential services for cattle producers, enabling them to raise, transport, and process their cattle efficiently. Texas also has a deep-rooted ranching heritage dating back to the early days of Spanish colonization. The state's long history of cattle ranching has led to the preservation of traditional knowledge, skills, and breeds. Experienced ranchers and skilled cowboys have played a crucial role in maintaining and advancing cattle-raising practices in Texas. This wealth of experience has been instrumental in shaping Texas into a cattle powerhouse. Furthermore, Texas has implemented supportive policies and programs to foster the growth and success of the cattle industry. State agencies and agricultural organizations work tirelessly to protect animal health, improve breeding stock, and provide resources to cattle producers. These efforts have created a thriving environment for cattle raising in Texas. Texas's cattle dominance is also evident when we look at the economic impact of the industry on the state. Cattle production contributes significantly to Texas's economy, generating billions of dollars in revenue and supporting countless jobs. The state's reputation as a major beef producer attracts investment, creates employment opportunities, and drives economic growth in rural communities. In conclusion, Texas's reign as the cattle capital of the United States is well-deserved. The state's favorable climate, abundant resources, cattle infrastructure, and ranching heritage have created the perfect conditions for raising cattle. Texas's cattle industry not only dominates in terms of numbers, but also contributes significantly to the state's economy and cultural identity. As long as Texas continues to invest in its cattle industry and supports its producers, it is likely to maintain its coveted title for years to come. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Texas and the cattle industry. Please stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Be sure to check out the links below for more interesting information. This is how much land would you need to store the entire herd of cattle located in Texas. But first, a message from today's video sponsor. The United States as a whole has the largest cattle herd in the world by far. The U.S. contains about 86.7 million head of cattle as of early 2025. That is almost double the next closest country, which is China with just under 47 million head. But the U.S. cattle herd has actually been shrinking for decades. Today, the U.S. cattle herd is the smallest it has been since at least 1951. And it is likely that this trend will continue. As of now, though, the U.S. contains the world's largest herd of cattle. But what if we were to remove all the cattle in one particular state? What if we removed all the cattle in Texas? How big would that area be? To answer this question, we can look at the latest data from the USDA that says Texas as a whole has about 12.2 million head of cattle. This means that Texas has the largest herd of cattle in the United States by far. Texas accounts for roughly 14% of the entire U.S. cattle inventory. Again, this is despite the national herd being at its smallest since at least 1951. But Texas has managed to maintain a large and consistent cattle population over the last few decades while every other state has declined. As a result, Texas has become a powerhouse of the U.S. cattle industry. So just how large is Texas's cattle herd compared to the rest of the world? Well, it's pretty massive. But comparing the size of Texas's cattle herd to other individual states or provinces is tricky. See, Texas alone has a total cattle herd size comparable to or larger than many countries or large cattle-producing regions worldwide. It is really hard to find good global rankings of subnational cattle herds, because there just isn't readily available data on cattle populations for every single state or province in every single country. But we do know that Texas alone has more cattle than many entire countries. For example, many countries known for large cattle populations, such as Brazil, India and Argentina, have overall national herds that are often in the tens or even hundreds of millions. But no individual state or province typically surpasses Texas's scale within their countries. Even in Australia, which has one of the largest cattle populations per area, no single state has a cattle herd size that rivals that of Texas. So unfortunately, it's very difficult to rank Texas against the rest of the world. But I'd argue that Texas is among the top cattle-producing regions on a global scale, including both countries and subnational regions. Let's take some of the biggest cattle-producing countries in the world: Brazil, the United States, China, India and Australia. These 5 countries together account for roughly half of all cattle in the world. And let's further break down these countries and see how Texas compares. First, we'll start with the United States. We already know that Texas has roughly 12.2 million head of cattle. Meanwhile, the entire U.S. has roughly 86.7 million head. This means that Texas accounts for roughly 14% of the U.S. cattle herd. Next, we'll look at Brazil. Brazil has roughly 213 million cattle. This means that Texas's cattle herd is roughly 5.7 times smaller than Brazil's. Then we'll look at China. China has roughly 47 million cattle. This means that Texas's cattle herd is roughly 2.6 times smaller than China's. Next, we'll look at India. India has roughly 192 million cattle. This means that Texas's cattle herd is roughly 15.8 times smaller than India's. Finally, we'll look at Australia. Australia has roughly 28 million cattle. This means that Texas's cattle herd is roughly 43% of Australia's. So based on these comparisons, we can see that Texas is by far the single largest subnational cattle herd in the world. In fact, it's larger than many countries' total cattle herds, including Brazil, the United States, China and Australia. It's only behind India, which has roughly 5.6 times more cattle than Texas. When we compare Texas to all the other cattle-producing states combined, Texas is still the single largest with nearly twice as many cattle as the second-place state, which is Nebraska with about 6.2 million head. In fact, Texas is so dominant when it comes to cattle that it is larger than the next 6 states combined. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, what if we include all the cattle in the US? Wouldn't Texas look a lot smaller? Well, not really. Yes, it's true that if we were to include all the cattle in the US, then Texas wouldn't be the biggest. But it would still be pretty damn close. If we add up all the cattle in the US, there are about 86.7 million cattle. This means that Texas's cattle herd is roughly 14% of the U.S. total. If we were to include all the cattle in the U.S., then Texas would drop down to the No. 4 spot. But it would still be one of the largest cattle herds in the world. It would be larger than all of Australia, China, and Brazil. Only India would have a larger cattle herd. In fact, it's not just Texas that would make the list. Several states would individually have the largest cattle herd of several countries. California would be the second largest with about 13 million head, which would still be larger than China and Brazil. Also, Nebraska at 6.2 million, North Dakota at 5.3 million, and Kansas at 4.7 million would each have a larger cattle herd than many countries. This demonstrates how large the U.S. cattle herd is overall. So based on all this data, we can see that Texas has the largest cattle herd in the United States, and it also has the largest cattle herd in the world, including both countries and subnational regions. In fact, Texas is the single largest subnational cattle herd globally. This means that if all the cattle in Texas were released into the wild, they would easily have enough space to roam around the entire state of Connecticut and still have plenty of room to spare. In fact, they would have enough space to roam around in Connecticut and Rhode Island, the two smallest states in the U.S. combined. They would also have enough space to roam around Denmark, the smallest country in Europe. Or they could take a trip across the ocean and roam around New Zealand, or they could travel even further south and roam around Tasmania. This truly shows just how massive Texas's cattle herd is. And it is important to understand how large it is because Texas is a critical hub for global beef production. And understanding the scale of the cattle herd here can help us better understand the beef industry as a whole. But just how large is this area exactly? Well, according to our calculations, the area of land needed to store the entire herd of cattle in Texas would be somewhere between 177,000 and 196,000 square miles. This is an extremely rough estimate, and it assumes that all of the cattle would be stored together in one area without any land for vegetation or other uses. To put this in perspective, this area is roughly equivalent to the combined area of New Mexico and Arizona, or just over 3 times the size of California. It is also roughly equivalent to the entire country of Bangladesh, or about 2/3 of the country of Indonesia. Now again, this is a very rough estimate, and it's not meant to be taken literally. It's simply meant to provide a general sense of the sheer scale of Texas's cattle herd. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. And a special thanks to our supporters. Texas is known as the Lone Star State, and they sure do love their stars. But what if I told you there was another star of Texas? Actually, 50 million of them. That's right. Texas is home to more cattle than people, almost 7 to 1. And the cattle industry plays a big role in the Texas economy, history, and culture. So let us take a look at how Texas became the top cattle state and the impacts that the cattle industry has on the economy. But first, if you could drop a like on this video, it goes a long way to supporting us. The cattle industry is an economic powerhouse in Texas. According to the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, the cattle industry alone contributes nearly $14 billion annually to Texas's gross domestic product. That's roughly equivalent to the GDP of Estonia or Grenada. No surprise, the vast majority of Texas's beef cows are found in rural areas. But even in cities, you can find traces of the cattle industry. For example, many residents of Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and other cities get their water from groundwater sources that rely on grazing land. Healthy grasslands can hold up to 4 times more carbon than forests. And cattle ranches store over 240 million tons of carbon in Texas alone. When you think of Texas, images of vast ranches and cowboys roam your mind. Well, that image is not far off. Texas boasts over 247,000 farms and ranches covering a massive 126.7 million acres, which is larger than the entire state of Wisconsin. In terms of cattle numbers, Texas leads the nation by a wide margin. The state's cattle population reached a record high of 5.4 million head in 2023. This represents around 14% of the total cattle population in the United States. That's like having 1 out of every 7 cows in the country. Texas's dominance in the cattle industry has been unwavering. It has consistently ranked first in the nation in cattle numbers for over a century. This supremacy is mainly due to Texas's favorable climate and abundant land resources. Much of the state is well suited for raising cattle, and there is ample space for them to graze. One of the main reasons for Texas's preeminence in the cattle industry is the state's extensive grazing land. Texas has a large amount of land suitable for cattle grazing, much of which is owned by ranches. These ranches often span thousands of acres, allowing for the raising of large herds of cattle. The state's climate is also well suited to cattle raising. Texas has a semi-arid climate with hot summers and mild winters, which is ideal for cattle. Additionally, the state receives adequate rainfall, although it is unevenly distributed, which provides enough water for cattle to graze. The cattle industry's impact on the Texas economy is substantial. The state's cattle industry generates billions of dollars in revenue each year. It also provides jobs to thousands of people across the state. From ranchers to cattle hands, the industry supports a wide range of occupations. Moreover, the cattle industry contributes to the economies of rural communities, which often depend on agriculture. The industry also contributes to the development of other industries in the state, such as the feed and grain industry, which produces food for cattle. This in turn creates jobs and generates revenue in those sectors as well. Overall, the cattle industry is a critical component of the Texas economy, providing jobs, generating revenue, and supporting rural communities. Its importance to the state's economy cannot be overstated. In 2021, Texas animal agriculture, which includes cattle, chickens, pigs, and sheep, contributed about $39.9 billion in economic output. To put this into perspective, if animal agriculture were its own industry, it would have ranked 47th among all industries in the state, sandwiched between aerospace and machinery manufacturing. The economic contribution of the cattle industry specifically is substantial. It accounts for a significant portion of the state's agricultural output, which itself contributes a substantial amount to the overall economy. Furthermore, the cattle industry provides employment opportunities to a large number of people across the state, both directly and indirectly. From cattle ranchers and farmers to those who work in related industries such as feed and grain production and meat processing. The industry supports a significant number of jobs, contributing to the state's employment rates. Moreover, the cattle industry is a major generator of tax revenue for local, state, and federal governments. The industry's economic activity results in substantial tax revenue, which is used to fund a variety of public services and programs. For instance, in 2021, animal agriculture contributed $8.8 billion in earnings for Texas households. Those earnings translated to an average annual wage of $43,200 for full-time farm workers, which is comparable to the average wage for all private sector jobs in the state. Also in 2021, Texas animal agriculture producers paid approximately $1.8 billion in income taxes at local, state, and federal levels. These figures highlight the significant contribution of the cattle industry to the Texas economy. The industry's economic impact extends beyond just the direct revenue it generates. It also creates a ripple effect throughout the state's economy, supporting jobs, generating tax revenue, and contributing to the livelihoods of countless individuals and families. The cattle industry's enduring significance to the state's economy underscores its crucial role in shaping Texas's economic landscape. As we mentioned earlier, Texas's cattle industry is deeply ingrained in the state's cultural fabric, reflecting a rich heritage and tradition that has evolved over time. Ranching way of life has been central to Texas's cultural identity since the early days of Spanish colonization. The introduction of cattle by the Spanish settlers had a profound impact on the region's ecology and economy. As the demand for beef grew, ranching became a prominent economic activity, shaping the social and cultural norms of the frontier communities. Texas's geographic features played a crucial role in the development of its cattle industry. The vast open spaces, diverse terrain, and favorable climate provided an ideal habitat for cattle raising. The state's ample grazing land and water resources supported the growth of large herds, making it possible for Texas to become a hub for cattle production. The iconic Texas Longhorn breed emerged as a symbol of the state's ranching heritage. These hardy and adaptable cattle with their distinctive horns became synonymous with the rugged individualism and pioneering spirit of Texas. Today, they are celebrated in rodeos, festivals, and artwork that depict the state's cultural heritage. Let's take a look at some of the events that celebrate this rich heritage. One of the most famous examples is the cattle drive reenactment at the Fort Worth stockyards. This event recreates the historic cattle drives that once took place in Texas. Participants drive a herd of cattle through the streets of Fort Worth, accompanied by cowboys on horseback. The event is a tribute to the state's ranching past and a popular tourist attraction. Another example is the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, one of the largest rodeos in the world. This annual event showcases a variety of rodeo competitions, livestock shows, and carnival rides. It celebrates Texas's agricultural heritage and attracts visitors from around the globe. Festivals like the Texas State Fair in Dallas also pay homage to the cattle industry. At the fair, visitors can enjoy traditional fair food, including plenty of barbecue and, of course, the iconic Big Tex, a giant cowboy hat-wearing steer made of chicken wire and wood. He is a beloved symbol of the fair and a testament to the state's deep connection to agriculture. To truly understand the influence of the cattle industry on Texas culture, you need to look no further than the University of Texas at Austin. Their official mascot is a steer named Bevo, short for the Texas Longhorn steer. The first Bevo appeared at a football game in 1916 and has been a fixture at sporting events ever since. Students spend hours each week caring for Bevo, ensuring he's healthy and ready to make appearances at various campus events. The current Bevo is a seventh-generation descendant of the original Bevo. That's a pretty strong connection to their roots. If you want to know more about the cattle industry, check out our video on the challenges facing cattle farmers today. And while you're at it, consider subscribing to stay up to date on all things agriculture. Who make videos like this possible?